You got it. Hold it, man. These guys don't understand. Hey, these guys got it all fucked up. It's all confused in their minds. Stop. Let's stop playing now. Wait a minute. Stop. Stop. These guys don't understand it. They're missing the geometrical thing that we're trying to do here. I can't sing. I'm not gonna be able to sing.
The last 4 calls, go back. The one before the last one, don't. I want the last 3. Go back 4. We got to do news, which kind of rolls through, and we'll talk to you a little bit afterwards. Get to the other questions. Maybe then we'll play. We will play heroin, and then I'll who you ass is out the door. I'll use you like Jeffrey Lee did for years, and then discard you. This is Indy 1031. My name's Dickie Barrett. Ward Dodson and Terry Graham, members of the Gun Club. So, listen. First question is, what was Jeffrey Lee Pierce like?
There were many years in a row where I just had this recurring dream of, just hitting him in the face with a golf club repeatedly.
Jeffrey, let's see, he was a tortured, evil genius.
We're using an 8-iron or 9 because I was actually thinking of a wedge would be the instrument that would deliver the most damage.
Sounds like you guys could write a book, right?
Well, it just so happens that I am writing a book.
The guy was insane, and there's nothing. It happened exactly the way it was supposed to.
If you were allowed to slug him once a day in the neck, then you could say, "Oh, okay, that was worth it." Like a kung fu right to the larynx.
The thing that's unfortunate is, he had a really good band, and he let it slip away from him.
Well, the first show I ever did with him, he came out in like a white Colonel Sanders outfit with a little bolo tie.
Right.
He had a huge Bible under his arm. He slammed the Bible down on the stage and then took his chain and started beating on the Bible. And I thought, well, I like this. This is pretty good. I'm from Texas, so I can appreciate this. He was the star of the show, and we all just jumped on and off. It was Jeff's musical misery tour. It's frustrating, I think, to us because we would have probably ridden it a lot farther with him if he would have just allowed it.
Could you appreciate the magic and the genius part of him as well?
Lyrically, he was like on par with the greats. I mean, we were
Would you
talking
call
about
him a
this
good
yesterday.
singer?
No, he sang in the key of Jeff, and he had bad time, and he wasn't the sexiest looking Jeff.
My kind of front man.
He definitely was fearless, and he tried to get a reaction out of the audience.
We'd walk off stage and look at each other and go, how much longer can we do this?
In Houston, for instance, we were pelted with beer cans before we even started the first song.
You put in this work and you think like this is a good deal, and then you go out and show everybody what you got, and they're like, hey, fuck off, get out of here.
And we almost didn't get out of the club alive.
You're lame, you know, we're gonna kill you if you don't get out of here.
They were bumping our van with their pickups. Two guys were doing that after the show. So, you know, it was a close call.
You know, I remember telling Jeffrey, like, can you not incense the crowd when it starts going south? And it was just, you know, no, fuck you. We're doing it this way. You know, he was a tough guy to be around, but
Right.
25 years later, here we are.
It feels like we were never here at all.
We were all just standing there, and Jeff was just really thought he was fucking Elvis. And that,
He
you
thought
know,
it was Elvis. Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, he really thought, he just believed so adamantly, like, just talk about a relentless self-promoter.
But think
you know?
about it. What good does it do you to be in Hollywood if you don't believe your own
Absolutely.
bullshit?
I would have to give some credit to his family. I mean, they were all, it's the weirdest thing. They thought he was like Elvis too. They treated him like
Yes,
he was
yes,
Elvis.
they did.
Okay.
Believe your myth, or
And I don't like for my child to keep the streets like a hole, a dog. Line on God. And they keep
that was our
line
first
on us.
manager. She's since.
In the streets, you know what the president did? And how many spiders can you take in your apartment?
She has a lot of problems with sweaters in her apartment.
And stand there.
For doing this, you're going to get us a couple of hot dogs, right?
I mean, I knew Jeffrey was nuts almost immediately. These super sweet people would let us stay at their places, and he would get thrown out of each place. Like, well, take bets. So these, you know, last 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, you know. He's just incorrigible, you know, making $700 phone calls to Europe and just all kinds of crazy shit. But, yeah, he just started acting more insane.
Jeffrey was definitely independent, on his own, do-it-yourself kind of person.
He had a stubbornness and a willfulness that was, you know, Jeffrey's way. Jeff and I met in drama class, which is the magnet for outsiders. We both felt like nobody understood us but the couple of other friends that we had in drama class. Jeff was a huge Brando fan. So we would go sneak off to Hollywood to the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute because Brando went there and James Dean went there. And we started reading plays. Jeff loved Pinter, I remember.
He's coming from some kind of nerdy kid locked up in his room with a bunch of cool books. You know, this guy read. You could tell he was literate. You know, he looked at maps. He read Conrad. You know, he was an interesting guy.
He had aspirations of being this great literary writer.
He would read a lot, and he turned me on to Malcolm Lowry, Under the Volcano. He was really into that. He would give me books. He over at his place he had bags and bags of books, and he was just reading. You know, he would read. He was crazy about William Burroughs, and he was crazy about William Kennedy.
He really felt he was onto something that nobody else was talking to by reading this stuff. We didn't get this stuff in school, but I think he felt he had struck a vein, that he was in the milieu of, you know, creativity, whether it was this great jazz, this great, you know, literature.
You know, when Jeffrey and I were hanging out, almost always it was either going to clubs to see music or we're going to record stores. You know, we did a lot of going through South Central LA and the San Fernando Valley, just looking for records.
We'd go to the beach. Well, a day at the beach with Jeff is nowhere near the beach. We would hit every thrift store between like Venice and Redondo, and we'd go to these record shops in Manhattan Beach, and we would come back with like a leather jacket, a couple of books, and some really great 45s, and never having seen the beach.
We called them record cruises. You know, just go looking for old blues records or 78s.
I'd have to practically scream at him, hey, the sun is setting, can't we at least look at the ocean? And, you know, you have to scream at him to really, before he felt like you really meant it. And we'd stop and look at the sunset and then get back in the car so we can hear our records and try our jackets on.
He had like a white vinyl trench coat. Maybe it was vinyl, but it was a white trench coat, like belted very tightly. A big Deborah Harry badge and a white cowboy, like I think they were even girls, 80s, 70s cowboy boots. And I thought, this guy is really, really nuts.
He was always wearing like striped French sailor shirts or like polka dotted tab collar shirts. He was really mod.
He was just a, baby-faced, nerdy guy. And he dressed funny. He wore saddle shoes. He wore makeup.
You didn't look at him and go like, wow, look at that freak. It was more like, what's going on inside this guy?
He had a very peculiar fashion sense. He would always talk about Marilyn Monroe during the 7-year itch period.
I think especially with the lipstick and the sort of strange male attempt to look like Marilyn Monroe, kind of an homage and tribute to his fascination with Debbie Harry.
He loved Deborah Harry of Blondie. They were like the embodiment of that crazy mod 60s beach culture. I mean, Blondie did songs like Love on the Pier or I Didn't Have the Nerve to Say No with all, Farfisa organ and those little 60s hand claps and go-go dresses.
When I met him, he was in this, Agent 99, Barbara Feldon and Get Smart look.
That look is not the kind of look that would make a woman go, yeah, him.
Jeffrey had a really horrible history of like falling completely in love with women that didn't give a fuck about him.
He was almost the equivalent of like your gay best friend.
He was like hopelessly in love with a lot of women all the time.
I think that Jeffrey really related on many levels, emotionally, psychologically, to women and what they were going through.
The bulk of the girls we had lived in our heads. There was a huge fantasy life. Yeah.
One of the first things that Jeffrey ever said to me was, "What are you?" And I thought that was a little odd. And then he said to me, "Well, I'm half Mexican." And I didn't think he looked half Mexican. I told him I couldn't tell. And he said, "We're both half-breeds."
We actually lived one suburb away from each other. He grew up in El Monte and I grew up in La Puente. So we grew up with Chicano culture.
In non-white cultures, it is a matriarchy. Jeffrey's mother and sister, although I don't personally know them, they seem to be a really strong and positive influence on him.
His mother's Latino, and it was a real kind of Latino thing, this whole attachment to family and what that means to people.
Jeffrey did get a lot of support from his mother. I think he was probably able to talk to both his mother and his sister in a way that he couldn't talk to his peers or other teenagers.
He was not comfortable around a lot of people, I guess.
The idea of being a half-breed and not fitting in with either or really sort of polarized culture of what our halves were seemed to be, at least, from where I stood, a constant theme in Jeffrey's struggle and probably why he was such an intense artist.
He had already had this electric guitar he bought, this SG, a Gibson SG that he had for years. He couldn't play real well.
His first songs were really poppy and really easy, carefree, like nursery rhyme-like lyrics, sort of 60s influenced pop songs.
He was really, another guy in his bedroom with a cool guitar.
He was really interested in crazy, carefree, funny girl pop records, and his first band, the Red Lights, kind of reflected that.
I don't know if they ever played, and all I've heard is the demo. I have a copy of the demo at home. But yeah, it's pretty good.
He encouraged everyone to perform. He
and I had this little band for a while. We did this rehearsal at his mother's house in the Valley. She was living at the Valley at the time. Originally it was going to be this blues and reggae hybrid band that never happened. And I think we learned 1 or 2 songs and called Pleasant up and said, oh, you got to hear this, and played it for her over the phone. And that was it. That was the entire thing the band did.
Jeffrey was hugely instrumental in Pleasant eventually becoming a performer.
Finally, one day he said, you should have a band. And I was like, I really don't want to have one. And he's like, well, too bad, because I put one together for you.
She kind of had no choice. She had to do it.
Jeffrey got us a gig at Gazzari's, and we all got so insanely drunk on Jack Daniels. Somehow a fist fight broke out on stage, and everyone, it was in the band. It was like Jeffrey and the drummer and Johnny, and everyone in the whole band was in the fist fight. And I think Jeffrey barfed on stage, too, on the side of the stage.
I thought, he really was maybe aiming below his abilities by, struggling with the guitar.
They thought it was like the most punk rock thing they'd ever seen. They didn't realize that it was supposed to be a rockabilly band. It was supposed to be this nice, wholesome rockabilly band, and it was like the worst train wreck ever. It was really, really terrible.
There was an element of humor to it, like an insane kind of humor, only for the people that knew that, how insane it was.
Jeffrey was very willful and stubborn, my viewpoint anyways, and that a guy like that, when he puts his mind to something, is going to succeed.
He would not be limited by anything. He would do whatever he wanted to do.
He really felt that he had struck a vein, and he was unshakable.
He was just simply going to stuff his head with knowledge, express that knowledge somehow, and it just didn't make any difference who was behind him, who was with him doing it, or who was in front of him watching him do it.
He related in the way prescient, bright, original people do to art and creativity and the imagination and wanting to be creative, and there was no other way. He was going to find it on that path. And honestly, he did not have social graces.
He was sitting right next to Chuck from Black Flag. And I didn't know Jeffrey, I didn't really know who he was or what he was about, but I definitely knew the one guy because, in a gigantic punk rock band. And Jeff was just sort of having his way. Like, you don't know anything about music.
The first time I ever met Jeffrey Lee Pierce was at a party at the Tropicana hotel on Santa Monica Boulevard.
We were both really drunk at this party.
And then somehow a mock fight broke out between Jeffrey Lee and Fast Freddy.
Somehow we got the idea that we were best friends, and because of that we should fight.
And the next thing you see is Freddy was on the ground on this motel room floor, and Jeffrey was on top of him with his knees on his collar.
I was just in pain. He's going, get up, come on, we got to fight, we're best friends, we got to fight. I go, you fight, find another best friend. I was in pain.
He broke Fast Freddy's collarbone.
It was my Monday night DJ thing. It was supposed to start that night at the Starwood, because I had a Monday night residency as a DJ there. That was my first night, and I was in a hospital. I couldn't go.
I went off to New York City, and I had a place in the Village, and Jeff stayed with me in New York for 5 or 6 months. And I was shooting some photos for magazines, and a friend, an acquaintance, had some magazines on the newsstands. And I was really trying to encourage Jeff with his writing, and I got Jeff his first writing gigs with this magazine called Record Review Magazine. And Jeff started writing these reviews. He was loving New York, but he wasn't really finding he was trying to put together a band. He was looking for, a band. Jeff, I guess, didn't have a lot of luck in New York, and took off.
I didn't go to Jamaica with Jeff, but he came back with a bunch of stories about it.
He was an adventurer and traveler in search of reggae.
If you go down there and get too curious, they'll cut you up and fuck you over if you're, at one of those nightclubs. Apparently stuck pretty close to the hotel room.
Mostly got hustled.
Probably the better part of valor to just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm just going to stay in the room and I'll imagine what I was doing at these clubs with these Rastafarians.
He sent me this postcard, so that would have been 79, I suppose. The postcard reads, "Finally got home. I went to Jamaica for a very long time. I went to New Orleans for another long time, and Memphis. When I came home last July, Slash Magazine asked me to write for them. My articles are in all the recent issues. It's very late now. I'm going to sleep. Ranking Jeffrey Lee."
You know, the little fuck. The first way I knew of Jeffrey was he was ranking Jeffrey Lee, and he was a writer for Slash, and he always used to write the reggae reviews. And which I was very heavily into reggae, and I was also, before I was a musician, I was actually a journalist. I wrote for magazines and different things, and I bailed on that, but I was still sending stuff out, and I was writing for like New York Rocker and things like that, and I would send stuff to Slash, and I would never get a response. And finally I found out Jeffrey would be in the office, would find the mail, would go through the mail, because he was basically anything that was competition, he was ripping up. So he was ripping up my shit.
Slash was a very large format newspaper style fanzine in Los Angeles that was really nice, a very high quality publication, and a lot of us felt like it you know, kind of legitimized the scene in a way, and so whoever was associated with that or wrote for it, you know, instantly took on, you know, some kind of glow.
It was actually good to know that it wasn't my writing just really sucked and these guys in LA hated it, you know, or something, but it was just fucking Jeffrey being like, you know, Jeffrey.
He was writing for Slash Magazine and different things, and that's one of the things we kind of bonded on, was that we were, you know, interested in writing about music as well as like being record collectors, and he was doing his Blondie fan club.
It was only beneficial to make him the president of their fan club because he was a real fan. I remember Blondie were staying at the Sunset Marquis Hotel, and Jeffrey really wanted to be in there. Jeffrey had found a shopping cart that was in the hall. Jeffrey was inside the shopping cart, and either Pleasant or I was pushing him down the hall when Debbie came out in the hall, and I think that was the moment that won Debbie Harry's heart. I think she understood that his heart was in the right place, that he idolized her for all the right reasons, that he loved the music, he loved the image, he understood what Blondie was trying to accomplish.
Jeffrey was the president of the Blondie fan club, and Kid Congo was the West Coast president of the Ramones fan club.
And I think we got terribly drunk, and we started talking a lot about writing, a lot about music, a lot about traveling. He had been traveling. He had been to Jamaica and New York, and I'd been in Europe and London and New York as well. And we were just talking about bands we liked and this and that. And eventually, kind of at the end, before, like when we went in, or maybe before the end of the night, it was like, well, we should have a band